Well, the product lifecycle represents kind of a theoretical model explaining the stages that product categories go through from the point to which they're introduced into the market until ultimately when they decline and are discontinued. And so what I'm going to try to do over the course of this video is convey the very essence of the product lifecycle and provide a little bit of detail behind how businesses support their products as they go through these various stages. I am going to try to keep this brief. There's a ton of material to cover related to the product lifecycle. But I do want to convey to start that this is a theoretical model, and that means that it doesn't necessarily explain the process that all products go through from creation to discontinuation, but it does provide us a little bit of a gauge for what to expect as far as the process that products go through, but also from a business standpoint, understanding how do we actually support products as they continue to get older and new products are introduced. And so it really is an equipping tool designed to help businesses understand how to support the various products that they begin to offer in a particular market. So with that being said, let's kind of go through these stages. If you're familiar with the product lifecycle, you know that there's 4 specific stages that represent a number of different things, but ultimately are reflected in terms of revenue and as well as in terms of profitability. So if you look at the graph that I have here, notice on one axis we have money that's generated, increasing, of course, as we move up. And on the right, on the lower axis, the x-axis, we have time. And so as time continues, the products will, of course, earn additional revenue and then, of course, go through a decline, although maybe not in that exact fashion. Now, as we go through these stages, one of the interesting things is how businesses promote, how they price, and how they distribute, and even the product themselves. How those things will change. So, for example, in the introductory stage, this is the first stage of the product lifecycle and is largely when a product is first introduced. And so this is when we're going to introduce the product for the very first time. It had not been previously offered. And so you can imagine during introduction, there's a lot of awareness that has to take place, right? There's not a great deal of competition at this particular stage, but because there's not competition, there's no reference as far as existing products that are similar. So businesses in this stage will spend a great deal of money on marketing because they are trying to raise awareness for the different product or the product that they actually offer. There's an educational piece that has to take place here. You can see here, this first line up top here in the purple, this is revenue. And the second line in the orange, that's profitability. And generally at this stage, there's not a great deal of either. And the reason, again, is that we are trying to raise awareness for the product category itself. And this is a very long process. It's not instantaneous. It takes some time to do. Now, generally, firms at this stage can expect very, very little profitability, and that's because they have quite a bit of what we call sunk costs. And those are all the costs that go into developing the product. You've got research and development costs, you've got product development costs, and those are the things that the company or the business would like to recover at some point. We have manufacturing costs, and we know initially manufacturing costs on a per unit level tend to be higher. As the company continues to manufacture a product, we begin to recognize different cost efficiencies and begin to produce the product for less over time. But initially, the product is the most expensive it's going to be on a per unit basis. Now, because of the fact that there are no other competitors, we have quite a bit of leeway in terms of our pricing strategy. So generally what you're going to see are 2 different types of pricing strategies. You're going to see what we call price skimming, which, if you're familiar with that, is simply altering the price at different stages. So we're skimming the least price sensitive customers, and then we lower prices once we run out of those types of customers. And you may also see a little bit of penetration pricing. And if you're familiar with penetration pricing, you know that it's initially offering a relatively low price in an attempt to gather market share, and then, of course, increasing prices as things go on. So you may utilize that strategy to acquire a wide customer base and then slowly and incrementally begin to increase prices. Now, as far as the customer we go after in the introduction stage, usually it is what we call the early adopter. And there's a couple of key reasons for that. The first of which is that because we're relatively new, we know that the broader market is not going to yet jump on board and instantly love what we do. But we know that there's going to be a smaller group of consumers who are anxiously awaiting for our particular product, and we commonly refer to these as early adopters. An early adopter, by definition, is really someone who wants to be the first to utilize a product, generally because they have an interest in that category, and they're oftentimes key influencers. From a business standpoint, early adopters are very valuable because they want really one thing, and that is to be the first to utilize something, but also they anticipate that the downside of being an early adopter is that the product is not going to be perfect. And that's important at this stage because generally the products that we produce first are going to have some kind of glitches or bugs or some type of problem that's going to yield the product to be less than perfect. So we don't want to market to a broader audience because they're not yet sure of what we do and if they value it, but also they do expect the product to be perfect. And the last thing we want to do is to tarnish our brand by prematurely targeting a broader market. And that's something that we don't necessarily want to do. As far as distribution, we're going to keep things what we call fairly selective, which means we're not going to distribute to a broader audience. We're going to use specific channels to try and establish a foothold, usually with key businesses that, again, our customer, the early adopter, already goes to.